Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello, and welcome back to another exciting edition of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Vaughn Smith, and this is our Cisco CCNA series for exam 200-301. We're moving into a new topic area of network topology architectures, and Mr. Ronnie Wong is here to give us an overview. And hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Vaughn. Thank you again for joining us as we continue on in this series. And yes, we are taking a look at, of course, at the idea of the networking topology architectures. It's quite a mouthful to actually have to say. But yes, this is one of the topics that's specifically called out on the exam objectives itself for this new exam that's coming up. And what we want to make sure that we have, of course, is that you can understand the characteristics of these different topologies as you see them. So our purpose, of course, in this episode is to make sure you understand where you're going to actually be seeing these things, and then we'll dive deeper into each one of these categories as we go through it in kind of a little mini series here. Okay. So Vaughn, does that sound exciting to you?
It sounds so exciting. I don't know what to do with myself.
All right. So Vaughn has overplayed it once again, but we appreciate her for actually doing this. Now, what we want to do, of course, is just kind of understand that when we start talking about the idea of networking topology architectures, it is that, breaking down those terms into what we do. Most of the time we think about the idea of topology, Vaughn, when we start doing that. And so when we start to talk about something like the topology, usually most people start thinking about a map of some sort, right?
Yes, I definitely see it as like, okay, where are we going? Where are we at? Where are all the pieces together? There's also another part of that particular word that stands out to me is like top. Mm-hmm. It's like the top level. We're kind of up over everything, looking down on the top level of any type of structure.
Right.
Yeah, so we're not getting too far down into the weeds when we say topology. And at least that's what my mind says.
Yeah, Once again, it really depends on what we're really looking at. But when Vaughn mentions this, right, what we want to make sure that we understand is that there's really two different types of topology that's out there, okay? One, of course, is what we call a physical topology. And for us, when we talk about networking topologies, these are the things that we've mentioned over and over again in terms of networking. For those that are ready, if you come to it with a prerequisite background or the requisite background that you need to have, right? Understanding the star topology, understanding the bus network, understanding the idea of those different layouts. We talk about ring topologies. You've heard all those different terminologies before, but that's the idea of how they actually are physically laid out. The other one, of course, is a logical topology too.
Yeah, and I'm thinking physical, just like the diagram that we were in our last section where you saw, like, this is where the router is connected to the switch, which is connected to the wireless LAN controllers,
right?
Yes.
Things like that. That's what we normally think about as far as the physical topology. But Vaughn, even more important than those things at times is understanding the logical topology. And the reason why we have to understand this as well, Vaughn, is that depending on where we end up working as a networking professional, what we're going to actually find out is two things here, okay? One, Vaughn, we may actually be the people that cable things together. They actually have to put these things in the proper order to do so. But there's a lot of times, Vaughn, especially if we're just beginning our networking careers, we are not going to be doing that. But what that also means, though, is that we have to be entrusted and they have to actually understand that we understand how those devices are supposed to be connected together in terms of the logical topologies, how they function together and the way that they work. And for us, Vaughn, in terms of networking topologies right now, and what we're talking about is that idea, that architectural foundation is really about the idea of the logical build out of how these things work together. And that's what we want to focus in on.
Would that be more of like why we're doing this, like why these two pieces are physically next to each other or why they're physically connected in the overall how this is supposed to work and why it's supposed to work the most efficiently?
Yeah, to a point, it really is, Vaughn. The very fact is we just have to understand that idea of the logic behind where the data flows from one place to the other and why they are connected in the way that they are connected. Vaughn, if we can take a look at the physical topology as it stands, the way that we tend to draw these things out is very spatially drawn, right? When we do a ring topology, we show you multiple nodes and we draw connections in between them. But Vaughn, in reality, when we take a look at something like that with the networking equipment that we have, they can be stacked right on top of each other and they can be cabled in a way. And Vaughn, that doesn't look like a ring to me at all. Same thing with the idea of the star topology, okay? The idea of star topology, the way that we draw a central connectivity device, and then we have, of course, different lines coming out from that central connectivity device. and that ends up making it look like a star. But in reality, though, Vaughn, it's a switch and it has tons of cables coming out, each to its own endpoint a lot of times. So it doesn't seem to actually follow in the physical topology the way that we normally think it does, the way that we normally present it. But the logical topology should still follow it in how they function and everything else that they do. But Vaughn, the other thing about the architecture that we want to know as well as the idea of the why here is where we tend to find them. Okay, so in this sense, we need to understand the context in which we find these topologies because that's going to actually depend on where you end up working or you're already working in the field right now. Okay, so Vaughn, what we want to do at least at this point is have an overview and understand something that we're actually going to be taking a look at several different areas. We're going to take a look at the idea of the data center. We're going to talk about different WAN topologies, the small office, home office topology, as well as the idea of the cloud nature and the topologies there. Those are kind of our broad general stroke and overviews here. So let's take a look briefly, and we'll show you what we'll be diving into a little bit later on. So Vaughn, in terms of the data center, okay, we normally follow what we call a 3-tier type of model, which we'll dive into, and we're going to actually talk about some specific details there, okay? And then we also talk about the idea of a 2-tier model, and this will depend on the size of the network that we have. We'll discuss why that's actually going to be important. Now, along with that, though, these are more traditional types of topologies, but there's also a newer one that is called the spine leaf architecture that's also out there, which we'll, of course, discuss and make sure that we understand what this is about as well. Okay, we'll actually talk about this one in depth, a little bit more in depth than what you see. You'll see all these different connections here representing the logical as well as the physical connections that we have between these devices too, and why that's going to be important. Then, Vaughn, once we get through with that idea, right, we can even go into the realm of the wireless routers, okay, as well as, actually kind of did 2 different things. That should be wireless router here, and this one should be just with a router instead of wireless. I don't know why I did that. So this one actually has a router and a switch combination instead. And we'll see that. And then, of course, the different WAN topologies too. So we'll spend a little bit of time. We won't spend a ton of time in terms of the SOHO, but just enough so that we understand it a little bit more.
And of course, for anybody out there, don't worry if you're trying to take notes. We're gonna, as Ronnie said, we will get into this. You're like, wait, slow down. I have to start writing all this down.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We're just letting you hear the terms, and that way it'll get into your brain a little bit more when we come back and visit these in another episode.
Yeah, that's actually a great reminder, Vaughn, because I sometimes forget that myself as I start to say, I want to dive deeper into it, and I go, oh no, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on. So Vaughn, in the WAN type of topologies, there's also the idea of the point-to-point topologies that's also out there, which is kind of standard. And this goes over those wireless access types, or excuse me, wide area network types, leased lines, MPLS, Metro Ethernet, broadband, site-to-site VPNs. All these are topologies that we should at least understand of, the choices that we have available to us and how that helps us out. But the overall topology across most of those connections are normally going to be what we call point-to-point types of topologies, as well as a more traditional hub and spoke design. It still runs over the same type of technology, but now we actually have different designs, and so hub and spoke and leased and point-to-point topologies, we'll make sure that we cover those too. And of course, there's the idea of the full mesh topology that we can also come across as well. Okay. Now, Vaughn, once we get in that, we're going to mention one other area here, which is the idea of how we connect to our service provider at some point. So there's what we call single home and dual home. We'll make sure that we discuss what the differences of those are and why that's actually important for us. We'll make sure that we jump in that. Now, Vaughn, once we're done with that, I didn't actually have a diagram for this one because it's a little bit harder to understand here, but we're going to focus in on cloud topologies just a little bit. Now, Vaughn, when we start talking about the cloud topologies, this is where the thing gets muddy. The reason why is that a cloud essentially is built upon the data center type of architecture and topology that we talk about. But the way that you and I encounter the cloud is actually differently. So there's what we call service models, and then there's what we call deployment models as well. Make sure that we discuss those too. So the idea of the service model, of course, is things like infrastructure as a service, and then platform as a service, and of course the idea of software as a service. Those are going to be the basic types of architecture that we'll be taking a look at as well. So Vaughn, all that, all together in what we're actually discussing, that will give us a pretty good understanding of some of the different types of networking topology architectures that we should at least be able to identify to help us as we work in the different fields. We'll understand what it is that we're actually working with a lot of times and how it is that those things are actually connected together and why they're actually doing what they do. That will help us to get a full understanding of the characteristics involved in each one of those different topology architectures.
All right. Well, that sounds like a plan. I'm ready to get into those details and learn more about this. And of course, if you're first hearing these terms, it's good to just keep repeating it and it'll get there. So thank you, Ronnie. Thank you all out there for watching. But we're going to go ahead and sign off for IT Pro TV. I've been your host, Vaughn Smith.
And I'm Ronnie Wong.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.